Welcome to the Business of Government Hour TV, a video companion to our flagship radio program. I'm Michael Keegan, your host. Each week, government executives and thought leaders join me for an informative, insightful, and in-depth conversation on improving government and its effectiveness. These individuals are truly changing the way government does business. How does the U.S. Air Force identify new technologies and promote innovation? And how do advances in technology ease the path toward IT modernization? I'll explore these questions and so much more with our special guest, Frank Konieczny, Chief Technology Officer of the U.S. Air Force. My co-host from IBM is Bill Shaw. Take a look, take a listen, download the entire interview at Podcast One, iTunes, and at businessofgovernment.org. Frank, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Glad to be here.
Great. So, Frank, before when we kick off the conversation, I like to give some context to our listeners. Would you describe the mission of your office, and how does it support the overall mission of the Air Force and DoD as a whole?
The overall mission of the CTO's office is to inject new technology and innovation into the entire Air Force in terms of IT. So we actually do this across the board, across all the MATCHCOMs, across all the programs, as well as across DoD. In fact, we have lots of coordination with DoD to do this.
Frank, you already mentioned that the Air Force has slotted your role as a CTO into the ASIC-CIO organization, and given that you've touched on some of your responsibilities, I'm curious what the difference between the CTO and the CIO function is within the organization, and what that dynamic is between the two roles.
Okay, well, the CIO is, again, it's oversight, governance, and I'm the technology arm of that oversight and governance, if you will. I do standards, I do DoD interfacing, I do other component interfacing for the technology side. I go across the board getting awareness of all the technologies in the industry and determining how they could be best applied to the missions that the Air Force particularly has. And we do this a lot. We talk to 3 to 5 vendors a week based upon technology areas that we want to investigate, and we actually go further with them in deep dives at times, and we invite other people from like the other 2-letter organizations to be there with us, as well as the CISO, depending on what's really going on, depending on what the project is. And then we refer them. We refer them to other components within the Air Force as necessary, and we say, hey, you guys need to look at this because this is something interesting. We also look at it from the viewpoint of roadmaps that we have to plan out for the Air Force, because sometimes we see technology that does not at the face value would not be applicable, but could be extended to do various things. In fact, and I won't mention who, but they came in and told us they were doing this particular thing, and we said, hey, that's really great, but that's not what we want. We want this other little piece that you think you're doing as a subordinate piece, but that's really the piece we want. And we're actually using them right now for that other piece because it worked really well. And they didn't realize that. It was an identity management piece, but it was surprising that they never thought about that. And all of a sudden they're pushing that and they're selling it to other components in the Air Force. So it's kind of interesting how that actually plays out.
So thanks for that context. So, in your role, what are some of your key, say, management challenges that you've faced, and how have you sought to address them?
Well, I think the chief management challenge is basically how do we coordinate across the Air Force with this technology? I mean, we develop a target baseline, which is supposed to be the 2 to 5 year out technologies that we want to produce, that we want to go forward with. And this is a futuristic view. It is not a current view.
Okay. That's a good distinction. Okay.
And as we say, it's 2 to 5 years out. We find that that's close enough to being reality because everything changes in 6 months in the IT industry. So we want to push it, say, here's what we want to do. And we do it for various things like some of it was for data management, some of it was for position navigation and technologies, some of it's for artificial intelligence, where we want to actually go and what tool sets. When we see the tool sets, we determine, hey, that's really where I think they're going to, but they may not be there yet. And so this is a target that says, here's what we want to get out of the baseline. And this target is open. It's not a closed target. We actually push it out to LCMC a while ago. Then they were supposed to do implementation baseline. That's currently being swayed into a ITSM kind of a role that we're doing through CIO's office now. And so the inject will be in the ITSM process of here's the technologies you want to go forward with and how you're going to manage those in requirements for the new budget and things.
So, Frank, what is your strategic technology vision? And where I'm going with that kind of question is, basically, could you outline your key strategic priorities?
Gee, that's what everybody wants to know. However, it changes. Let's talk about it in generalities. We're always mission-focused. Mm-hmm. And so when we look at my target baseline, for instance, we base our targets on use cases and scenarios that the operational community gives us. So For instance, we'll be talking, we have one on mobility and everything else. What does it mean for mobility? It's a use case. And so we look at it, the strategic plan is to try to alleviate some of the use case issues that we have from the field. And that changes. I mean, we do 2 target releases a year roughly, and so we get different things every 6 months. Mm-hmm. And so strategic direction is kind of rough to say because everybody wants me to say, okay, here's the document, go follow it. Well, that's the old way of looking at things. I mean, we don't like to produce documents and say here because the shelf life is too fast and they just don't bother reading it. So it's a push to say, the operational community, tell us what your problem spaces are. Don't tell us the solution. We will figure out in the target baseline what your capabilities should be that you should be delivered to you, and therefore we'll probably field those capabilities. And that's the way we're playing it right now.
Yeah, Frank, many of your business systems, your mission systems, they're running on legacy systems. That is a good thing. It means they've been out there, fielded, successful, sustained, filling a mission requirement. But we know you are looking at modernization. We know you're looking at and have started a series of cloud migration initiatives across the Air Force. Can you tell us more about your efforts in migrating to the cloud? And really, a multi-part question, what is the Air Force's approach to using the cloud going to be in context of other larger DoD initiatives? And really, what is next for the Air Force in this area?
We are using the cloud. We've set up, actually, A1 has set up its own organization to actually do the migration, support the migration. We have LCMC setting up the MSO basically to support the other side of the migration efforts to do this. And so we realized at the beginning that we had to have some organizations support the migration that was different from the PMOs because they had no idea what it meant to migrate. I mean, they had no idea. They had no costs, no idea what the cost is because we'd always get, well, how much is it going to cost me to do this and do I have it in my budget? And a lot of times, we would say we don't know the cost, and they say, well, I can't put it in my budget. So you have a chicken-egg situation going on immediately. And so now that we have some support, we have some ideas of how much it actually costs to migrate based upon history now of actually doing this. And so the idea is to move to multiple clouds or use also software as a service, which we have for one of our military personnel applications right now. We're actually running that, and that's been working fine. So the eventuality is to start moving things out to a particular cloud. Now, the clouds for us are 2 places, or 3 places. It's DoD clouds, commercial clouds, and clouds on the bases. The Air Force philosophy is that we fight from a base. So therefore, any mission-critical applications that have to be run at the base have to be at the base. So if the comm network goes down or is denied service to us, whatever, we cannot link to a commercial cloud or a DoD cloud because the comm network may be out. So the base has to operate independently of itself, of everybody else. So the idea is we have multiple clouds that we're having. And people get very upset about that when we say, oh, yeah, we're going to cut ourselves down to 126 clouds. And they're like, what do you mean 126 clouds? We have 2 DODs and we have 3-4 commercials. When are you going to do 126? Well, that's the way that we have to fight. And we explain, okay, we have certain apps that have to sit at the base, like fuel management. Sorry, it can't be centralized because it's just one of those things that we do from the base. And so there's things like that we do. So the philosophy is to go to a cloud. Now, there's another philosophy too. As we have legacy systems out there and they are difficult to actually migrate to the cloud, what mobile applications can we actually put on top of them to actually do a mobile version of this that allows them to look like they're in a cloud? And so we're talking about A4, the logistics side is actually doing one of these right now. They're linking to a legacy app. Legacy app is rather complex. Logistics-wise, has multiple screens. It's standard old legacy app. And so they're actually porting it down to a phone level or a pad level capability where they never see the screens. They just see data entry points and exit points and searches, and they get the information back from the legacy. So that's the other part of the modernization is how do I maintain the legacies because I can't instantaneously migrate them to a new capability. And so this is the way we're talking about modernization.
We spent a good bit of time talking about modernization. How has technology eased the path towards your IT modernization efforts? Can you talk about some of the successes the Air Force has had with modernization? And then really, maybe most importantly, what still needs to happen to accelerate modernization across the Air Force?
Okay, there's 2 ways looking at modernization. How can I migrate my old applications and what can I do to generate new applications? For the old ones, we talked about auto provisioning out to the clouds. We've fielded some of those capabilities already. We're trying to field some more, so it'd be easier to actually provision out in a secure manner, so that all the platform is stigged already accordingly, so you don't have to do that work. So we're working with that as well. The new side is, DevOps. What can we do for DevOps for new systems? We're talking about doing a process for DevOps that will basically get most of the ATO credentials done already for the RMF, Risk Management Framework. And so we currently have one process that we think is going to work, that we can actually do what I hate to say is ATO in a day, but it means that based on the process and the documentation, and from the process that's automated, we can actually go and field an application within a day after they start. And so we're playing with that as well as what do we want to do for continuous monitoring? What applications, what tool sets can we utilize to do continuous monitoring, not only for the risk management framework, but also for the financial controls, for the audits that we have to do for the business side? What can I do to actually put things out there that actually supports telling me that all of a sudden I have a FISCAM control that is no longer valid? And then I can get my action officers to actually fix that. That's not. And that's one of the issues that we have right now. What tool sets we want to have to automate all of these processes. And we're trying several of them right now in experiments and pilots.
I was wondering, the CTO position itself sort of evolved. How has it, in your mind, evolved to being that of a trusted advisor in your role? And more importantly, what makes an effective CTO? What kind of qualities?
Okay, let's talk about trusted advisor. And it's interesting in my job because since we have such a small staff, purposefully, and it's purposely a small staff because I cannot build a kingdom. And so everybody's like, okay, he's here to help me. He's not here to take away resources and people and everything else. And so that becomes a trust viewpoint that they look at us and say, hey, we're here to help you. We're not trying to take things away from you. We're trying to give you things. And so that actually helps across the board. It helps with the CIO side too, that we actually give out information to other people within the Air Force. We're not hoarding anything. So we are trusted. I basically do a lot of vendor management myself now because the CEO likes me as a group as a coordination point across all the vendors because we see them all and we all know what's going on. Now, what's a good CTO? I think you have to look for the enterprise viewpoint. I mean, you're there to support the enterprise. You're not there to support yourself. And that's one of the problems that you think people have at times. A lot of times you go to research labs and they're there to support themselves. They come out with cool ideas that nobody really needs, but it's really a cool idea. And so we're going back to what mission do I have to support across the Air Force? And that's what a CTO has to do. Even in industry, when I was in industry as CTO, I had to support the missions across the company. It wasn't that, I have this real cool idea. I had some real cool ideas, but I wasn't going to support the company. So a lot of the ideas come out based, just that. What can I do across the board? And that's what people have to think about. They just can't think small. They have to think large and understand that a lot of people are going to complain to you all the time. I mean, they're like, I have this problem. Why can't you solve it? And the answer is a lot of times the CEO has the same problem. It's a question of, for the enterprise, this is what we're going to have to do. It may not be what you want to do, but across the board, this is more effective across for the enterprise. And that's the viewpoint you always have to take.
Be sure to join us next time on the Business of Government Hour for another informative, insightful, and in-depth conversation. Until then, it's businessofgovernment.org.